Good afternoon, everyone. Just waiting to get everyone on the call and then we'll get started.
Thanks everyone for joining. Hi, and Andrea, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have everyone who accepted the invite here.
Yep, we do. Wait, looks like everyone's in now.
Wonderful.
Do you want to go ahead and take us to the slides? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate both all of you who are able to be here for this live session, as well as just affirming to everyone that we are recording the session so that we can provide it to your colleagues who weren't able to be with us today. Want to go to the next slide? So what we want to do today, we've set aside 45 minutes. We don't know that we'll need all that time, but we certainly want to make sure we had enough time. We want to talk to you about this upcoming grant opportunity that ECIC has received and wants to engage all of you in as partners. We want to talk a little bit about pretty high level about subrecipient expectations and some award information. And then we'll be talking about letters of commitment and then our timeline and next steps. So I think that everyone has at least heard one time through, but I'm going to just sort of start at the beginning here. So last year, the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, specifically the Child Care Innovation Fund, won a federal earmark from the U.S. Department of Labor. This was a $2 million federal earmark that the Lieutenant Governor was one of the chief advocates for. And we are in the process right now of preparing to submit our application to the U.S. Department of Labor, which we would like to do before the Christmas holiday. We do, and we're well along in that process, like far enough along to be able to talk to all of you who we would like to engage in that as partners. So the purpose of this project is to continue to work on solving the childcare crisis in Michigan through building our pipeline of well-paid and highly skilled early educators, and that we've been working, as all of you know, to do that in partnership with you all as representatives and partners in the public workforce system. What we are proposing to the U.S. Department of Labor is that we provide one-time grants to the 8 Michigan Works agencies that are currently designing their early care and education registered apprenticeship programs to join the other grantees that we're funding now who have been scaled up. So in essence, what we're proposing is to provide all of you who are design grantees who get your apprenticeships registered an additional 15 months of funding. And we'll talk more about when that would start. That would allow you to increase the number, we hope, of childcare employers and early educators who might be able to be participating in your registered apprenticeships. So the way that this grant is going to function is going to be a little bit different than the current grant that you have with us. You know, to state the obvious, you're not currently serving apprentices as design grantees. The source for funding for this grant will be section 169C of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Our intention is to provide region-specific award amounts that will be based on the number and type of childcare employers in your region. So we've been doing analysis. We have the ability through the data system that we have for Great Start to Quality that the Early Childhood Investment Corporation runs for the state of Michigan. We have the ability to see exactly how many childcare centers, homes, and family group homes are in your region on any given day. So we'll pick a date by which we'll draw down the sample, which we've already done. And so we can see how many childcare centers you have, what their capacity is. We can see how many family homes you have. We can see how many group. For everyone to understand, a family childcare does not have any employees. It has one staff who is the business owner. So that is not a childcare employer by the definition that we are using for this grant. So we will be only looking at childcare centers and also family group who have one staff person in addition to the business owner. So that means in some of your regions, which you know are quite small, your grant size would be smaller. And in regions that have a larger number of childcare employers and early educators, grants will be larger. Because this is a federal grant, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with working with the U.S. Department of Labor, we have to set performance targets. And because you will be subrecipients in this grant, your current grant with ECIC, you are not subrecipients. You are what we call grantees. We are the subrecipient to the Michigan Department of Education, and then we give you a grant, but we don't pass along to you the same kind of reporting and performance expectations that we have for the Michigan Department of Education. Under this grant, the only way we've been able to work this out with the U.S. Department of Labor is that you have to be our subrecipients, which means that you may be familiar with that with other grants. We will have what our hope to do is to use a quarterly cadence for the subrecipient reporting, which would include performance reporting, progress reporting, and reporting on the established metrics. The two metrics that we are proposing in our grant application will be number of childcare employers that become associated with the Registered Apprenticeship Program, and then number of apprentices. So over the course of the 15-month grant, we'd have a target number of employers and apprentices for each subrecipient based on what we think is reasonable and feasible given the number of employers and early educators you have in your region. Carrie, we'll come back around to all the questions here in just a moment. That's a really great question. Our intention is, of course, that you will know what the targets are, and we'll have an opportunity to have further conversation about those individually with each one of you, if you would choose to join us in this opportunity. So just to summarize this, region-specific award amounts based on number and type of childcare employers, reasonable and aligned performance targets, and then quarterly cadence for reporting. Misty, I think you can go on to the next slide. So one of the things that is true about this grant opportunity with the U.S. Department of Labor is that each sub-grantee, sub-recipient has to sign a letter of commitment. It has to be a detailed letter. It has to be a specific letter. It has to include the performance targets. So what you see on the screen right now is our current draft of this letter. We will be sending a specific letter to each one of you in the next week or so as we finalize our details here at ECIC. We wanted to show it to you today so that you could have a sense of the kinds of things we'd be asking you to commit to. And then all of your letters would be included as a part of this application. You would be identified as partners and subrecipients in our grant to the U.S. Department of Labor. And then we also have to, for example, and we can share this with all of you as well, we have to make a partnership organizational chart where it will show how you are related to ECIC and our work. So it's a visual representation of this that is then backed up by these letters of commitment. The things that are in here are the same things that the current scale up grantees are doing. So we are not intending to make changes in how we're helping to support the scale up of early care and education registered apprenticeship. We're just excited that we have the opportunity to give you a second grant, which we did not expect to be able to do because the ARPA funding is running out at the end of September. But with this U.S. Department of Labor grant, we can give you a second grant to hopefully give you, 15 more months of time to really get this program in place. So, so here's a better view of the letter itself. So I'll just walk through and then we can pause and take some questions. So most of this is what's federally required. There's a certain format we have to follow. So I apologize if it's a little cumbersome, but this is the expectation. So all letters have to be on you have to use your organizational letterhead for this letter. We need name, title, address, etc. Then you are basically making this commitment to us. You will also know your funding amount by the time you sign this letter. So you won't be asked to sign this letter until you know how much money we are going to be able to offer to you and then what your performance targets are. And then the scope of the partnership is the 6 items that are listed here, which again are exactly the same as they are for the scale up grantees. So it's continuing to work with your registered apprenticeship partnership, which is the partners on the roster you submitted to us. Like, who are those organizations that you're working with? We'd anticipate you'd continue working with them, or you'd be telling us if you have new or different partners as you move into implementation. Making available through the work of the partnership and other relationships, these non-academic supports. So who are your wraparound partners? Who are you referring people to? What are the opportunities for peer-to-peer support for apprentices? Assuring that all public workforce and early childhood funds are maximized equitably for each apprentice and their employer. Doing the outreach, recruitment, and engagement of employers. Strengthening on-the-job training with early childhood employer partners as is needed, which might be incentives and supports from inner teachers, helping to make sure the supervision of the apprentice and mentor is going well, helping as needed with coaching and professional learning. We've got some upcoming sessions with the Bank Street College of Education that the professional learning community is going to be having around mentor teachers. So I think you'll have lots of ideas. I'm sure you have many already about how we can have a really great mentor teacher and apprentice relationship for all early educators. And then working with childcare employers to assure all apprentices in the region get their wage increases as they are supposed to. And then the outcomes are listed here. And again, we'll have your specific targets in here that we would provide to you based on our kind of calculations of looking at your employers, et cetera. And again, we're open to conversation about those. The thing about these targets is the goal of this grant opportunity is to achieve them. So you do want to look hard at them because U.S. Department of Labor will monitor us and could potentially, of course, make an on-site visit to any of you as our subrecipient to understand the work, right? So this relationship that we will have together with the U.S. Department of Labor is not going to feel exactly the same as the one you've had with us up until now. Maybe more familiar because you've perhaps worked on U.S. labor funding before, but it's definitely new to us. And then we have to have, of course, the signature, et cetera. So let me pause there and start with questions. What specific information would be helpful for you, Carrie? Because I think we were kind of hoping this was going to be it through having the recording, but we're happy to put anything together for you that would be great, helpful to you.
I think just especially related to the funding mechanism with knowing that this is WIOA dollars, our workforce systems are used to implementing WIOA programs, but there's also eligibility, there's data reporting requirements. Are you all having to work alongside of LEO? Because will this program factor into our statewide performance as it relates to WIOA? Knowing the funding source, that really raises a lot of questions already in my own head.
That is great for us to hear. We do have Leo does know that this is our intention, and we will definitely take forward your questions to them so that we can get some more understanding. They haven't raised anything specifically up until now to us, but we will press in on that for
Yeah,
sure.
I would really encourage that strongly sooner rather than later, just because WIOA is a very, very detailed, there is system-wide and regional performance for held to and designation attached to WIOA. And I want to make sure that if we choose to participate, this is not potentially going to count against our regional WIOA workforce programming, or also be a barrier, because if you're looking at eligibility for WIOA, there is income requirements, there's eligibility status related to gathering, public assistance records. There's a lot that you have to dig into as it relates to WIOA eligibility. And I'm unclear about if this grant will be held to our normal standards. And I think that would be helpful for us all to understand.
Yeah, me too. Nothing like that has been raised by the federal project officer, but again, we will ask specifically again, given your sensitivity and experience, so that everybody could go into this with the same level of, ourselves included, with the same level of understanding.
The other thing to ask is if it would factor into data validation. We have data validation that we're held to, where the federal government, USDOL, will select files under WIOA that they will want to come in and cross-check. So there's all those sorts of things that when you're talking about WIOA, that I think I would like to understand clarity on, and I'm sure that my peers would too, who are on this call. I see them nodding their head.
Yep, absolutely. And if need be, I'm sure we can take those questions to our federal project officer as well. So
yeah, and if you need us certainly to be a part of that, just so we make sure, we're asking the questions we may have. Everything right now for WIOA is recorded in the one-stop management information system that LEO regulates, along with DTMB. So this all have to be in that too. Those are the sorts of details we're going to have to understand as we're making these decisions.
Okay, that all sounds great. We actually have a timeline, Karen, which we'll show here in a minute. Any other questions about what I've shared so far?
Joan, I would just add, definitely same perspective as Carrie, but I am going to also indicate that I am not signing any letter of support until we receive clarification on that.
Yeah, understood. And trust me, this is a higher order letter than a letter of support. This is like confirming we will be a partner and we will do this work, because we're the applicant, but from the beginning, you'd be in this with us together. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
and I hope you understand Carrie's point, and that is very important for us to receive clarification on before we commit to anything.
Yep. Understood.
The other question too, I think alongside of that, is with WIOA, we're required to go through federal procurement to get subrecipients in place for anything $10,000 above. So that's again, that clarity. If we're signing on to commit, is that requirement waived under this specific funding mechanism? Because typically that would not be. We'd be signing on a letter of support, and then if you're granted it, then you would have to RFP things out to get that funding to your subrecipients. So there's a lot of technicalities when it comes to WIOA funding, and I just want to make that sure we're not going to get our hands slapped if we say yes and then the feds come in to monitor us.
Understood. Anything else? Okay, Misty, I think we can go back to the slides then. All right. So here's the anticipated timeline. And I say anticipated knowing, like, today is the 27th. This December 8th timeline, we understand, may not be realistic. We are wanting to try to submit this. Our endeavor would be to submit this grant before Christmas if we can. We have until January 31st. So we have a little bit more time in January, but we were trying to put a target out there. Obviously, we understand that we need to get answers to these very important questions before anyone is going to be signing any letters. And we'll be starting to work on that today after this meeting, putting those questions together and getting responses. So if we're able to get letters in time, we'd like to submit on December 15th. If not, we'll, our goal is we have to submit by January 31st. Our intention at this point is that these contracts with you would start October 1st of 2024 and then would run for 15 months. That means we'd be working with all of you this summer in the last quarter of this fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts October 1st. So in the last quarter of the current fiscal year we'd be working to get together all the information that we will need, including we have to do a sub-recipient risk assessment with each one of you before we can give you this funding. And then we would have contracts in place with the idea that we understand that typically apprentices would be starting at either in the September, I'm going to use the word semester, or they'd be starting in the January semester. So it would be up to you in your project plan to tell us. So what we're anticipating is there'd be approximately 3 months of outreach, recruitment, engagement, those kind of things happening, and then apprentices would hopefully be starting in January, depending on what type of relationships you have and are using. Either you're using a community college, or whether or not you're doing online, or whether you're doing some hybrid version of that for your apprentices. And then we'd have 15 months of funding to work together on. And I think we will provide the slides today to all of you, along with the recording. We wanted to give you contact information. I think at this point, the best thing for you to do, if you've got additional questions about this very specific grant opportunity that come up after this meeting, like literally you're sitting at your desk or driving in your car, you think about it on Wednesday, please send those questions to Andrea. She is our grants manager. She'll be the person that'll be responsible for putting together the quote unquote application process, because you're our partners. So what we're going to be asking you for, you're not competing here. Our goal would be to get this funding to all of you. But any specific questions, please get to Andrea, and then she'll triage those. And ideally, we'd like to have, beyond what's been asked today, if there's any other big picture worries about what does it mean for us to get this money from WIOA, what are some of the things we're going to have to think about, if we could get those in the next 2 to 3 days, that would be ideal. Because what I would like to do is reach out to our federal project officer with these questions as a group, if we can. And then Misty, I think you can take the slides down and we can see if there's any other questions before we let people go.
Joan, I have a question. So I understand the other Michigan Works agencies have been doing these scale up grants for a period of time. Is there funding also WIOA funding?
No, the current funding they have is ARPA.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
That's where there's the big discrepancy and the big differences, and how this is going to be much more difficult for us than it was probably for them.
Yeah, and this is a specific kind of funding. It is considered a community project. So these federal earmarks are unusual. They haven't been funded in some time. They happened to be funded in the last congressional session. And so there were hundreds of organizations that got these federal earmarks. So our sense that we've been given so far is that these are a bit outside the norm of what US labor typically does, because people are doing all kinds of different things with this WIOA money. So it's not, I guess what I'm trying to convey to you is that we may indeed find all the things that you're raising as concerns, but not everybody's doing apprenticeship with this money. This money is being used for what 300 or 400 different things. So it's more flexible in its ability to be used, is what we've been told. So we'll get the details, sorted out, but this is not just an apprenticeship grant opportunity that's been offered to organizations. This is a very broad-based, very open-ended, communities doing all kinds of different things with this WIOA money. We're just choosing, because we wanted to invest further in you and our partnership with you, to use the funding this way.
Right, and we'd love to be a partner. I mean, we're making great headway with our planning grant, and that's, I mean, I don't want you to think that I don't want to partner.
No, I don't hear that at all. Not
But
at
I
all.
also need to keep in mind all the restrictions with WIOA funding.
Sure, absolutely.
The other thing I would echo with Shelley is when I just went and read 169C, it doesn't say anything about being excluded from performance or anything that WIOA is held to. That's where I think getting clarity and in writing from your FPO about what is and what is not required, and then following that up with Leo, because Leo has ultimate responsibility for other WIOA funding, would give us a lot of peace of mind. And also understanding when you talk about if you're giving funding for specific apprentices, that's where oftentimes we have to look at eligibility, which is challenging sometimes if you're looking at it from federal eligibility under WIOA. So we just want to make sure that we're really crystal clear, because we've had other projects where it has been challenging, coming through Leo when it's WIOA funds too. So.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we close today?
Just one other quick thing. You may also want to ask them if they're required to adhere to all of the equal opportunity provisions with under WIOA. There's a lot of other certifications and processes we have to follow if it's WIOA dollars. So getting some of that clarity too, you may want to seek that too.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and for your questions, of course. And if you do think of anything else, please do reach out to Andrea, and we will start putting together these questions and seeking answers yet today. So take care, everybody. You'll get some follow-up from us today, hopefully the recording and the slides.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Everybody.